So this video I am going to be talking about different revision tactics and specifically how to revise for component 3 for the written exam in drama. So there are quite a few things that you can do to help you prepare for your exams and in drama specifically. Obviously, with it being one of the first exams every year, it's good to get ahead and to figure out how best to revise so you can start as early as possible. So I asked my year 11 students what they found the most useful so far, and I'm going to go through a few of them and then I'm going to throw in some of my own suggestions as well. So the number one thing that my current year 11 class said was the best thing they did was past papers. Now the course isn't very old, so there aren't that many past papers. However, a lot of the questions are quite formulaic in that they look the same every year. So if you learn the formulae, you can actually make up your own questions and use the mark schemes, particularly from other exams, to try and help you mark what you've done afterwards. Because it's great getting your teacher or tutor to mark your answers for you, but if you understand the mark schemes truly, then you can help kind of, when you're checking your answers in the exam, read that information and kind of enhance your answers to be the best that they can be. So in terms of accessing past papers, a member of staff is going to have to do that for you because they come directly from the Edexcel website, or like I said, you can try and make your own questions. So that's tip number one. The next thing that my class said that they really enjoyed is actually using YouTube, because there are so many different videos out there that they could find something really specific and try and work on that. Now a lot of people prefer audio revision techniques rather than sitting and reading, in my class in particular. So I know when they were learning lines, a lot of them would listen to their lines rather than saying them over and over again. So listening to something can really help you. And things like Quizlet and GCSE Bite Size and GCSE Pod, if you and your school have access to that, can also be really useful to enhance all of that stuff that you find on YouTube. There's a lot of brilliant YouTubers, so Drama with Dan is an example of one. So have a watch and try and pick up his information, maybe even have the subtitles on as you're watching the video, so you're reading and listening and watching at the same time. Because the more ways that you revise, the more likely you are to remember it. So this is an idea called dual processing. And the idea that if you try to take in a piece of information in one particular way, let's say somebody says something to you, the likeliness of remembering that bit of information is quite small. But if you process that information in more than one way, such as if somebody tells you something and you then say it back to them and then you write a note in your phone, that's you processing the information in lots of different ways. And this is really useful for when it comes to revising. So a lot of people like to listen or draw colours, or maybe even like read the information, summarise it and then put it into a spider diagram, because that's how their brain works. You've got to find what works for you and trying lots of different techniques, but as long as you're mixing up the variety, that's what's really going to help this learning stick, and it's going to make retrieval even easier. Because if you know you did a beautiful spider diagram and you put the keywords for performance skills in green pen, the likeliness is that you remember writing the words and you remember colouring it in green, so that helps you remember the information in that way. So that's a little bit about dual processing. Interleaving is something that my year 11 said that they have tried to do but haven't quite got the knack of yet. And it's this idea of doing small chunks of lots of different subjects together that maybe have like a common thread to help with that idea of dual processing. So for example, if you're doing Macbeth in English and you are looking at the structure of the stanzas or whatever, you could then have a look at DNA afterwards and have a look at that structure if that's something that you want to revise. And it works with lots and lots of different subjects, but doing little chunks of lots of things next to each other, rather than just trying to remember, you know, doing an hour and a half of physics, for example, your brain's probably going to struggle to remember so much similar information. So if you're chunking it down and interleaving it, that's really going to help your brain remember it moving forward. Now, here are some of the other tactics that my class said. So, one thing that they said is actually group revision is something that they find really, really useful. So, such as having information on flashcards and testing each other, or even sitting down and summarising a scene that they've just read together, or an extract from the revision guide they've just looked at, and things like that. So if you can revise on your own but also revise in a group, you might find that really, really useful. And another way you can do that is finding somebody that isn't studying drama and trying to explain the key concepts to them, because that way you're having to verbalise it in such a way that somebody who doesn't know drama can understand. It's also helping your understanding moving forward. So here's a few things that I recommend separately from what my class recommended. So my first big recommendation is, whatever your set text is, making a full design for that play, like your version of that play. So we study DNA, so what I would do is I'd have a big piece of paper that has my staging, my set, my lighting, my props and stage furniture, my costume, ideas for sound and music. Have all of that information on there, and if you can, the pros and cons of why you've chose it. So my class, I've asked them to have a big piece of paper with their design on, and then a separate sheet that kind of has that pro and con list, because that's going to help you with your answers, and especially the more difficult answers like the 14 marker and the 9 marker. If you know your vision so clearly that it's recalling rather than creating on the spot, not only are you going to save time in your exam, but it's going to be much more of a detailed answer. And if you want to proper big brain it, and you want to put in things like the original performance context, so like, I've chosen end on stage because in the original production they had an end on stage, or I have chosen to use a projector because it would be cheap for school productions to use, and this play is aimed at students. You could go kind of that way, or you could even link in some of the play's themes and issues and the social, historical, political, cultural context of the time. So, for example, we often say in DNA, you could have litter on the floor in your scenes because there's themes of antisocial behaviour and about nature in there. You could have graffiti of peace signs and things everywhere because there was a fear of terrorism at the time. And you can kind of link in some of these like really hard, difficult points to wrap your head around. But if it's in your design that you have revised and you have drawn and narrated and all of that, that could help you in your exam, because you're just kind of regurgitating that information rather than trying to pick it up on the spot like you might do in the exam. Especially because with it being like a mark a minute in the exam paper, you want as much writing time as possible. You don't have that time to think about it on the spot. So, other things that I think are really, really useful, making sure you take regular breaks in your revision, kind of ties in with the interleaving idea. You cannot cram for this exam the night before. You need to do little and often. It's going to really, really help. Use your class exercise book. You will have notes in there from all the way back in year 10. You might even have some year 9 notes or whatever. Use that. That could really, really help you. And also you can see how far you've come as well. So make sure you have a look at that. Another good thing is thinking about the bigger picture. So this is if you are maybe aiming a little bit higher grade-wise. You want to think about things like hinge questions. These like open questions that make you think through your design thoroughly. I will link some hinge questions down below to give you an example of what I mean. Another thing that works really, really well for some people is treating yourself somehow after you have revised. So an example could be you do this massive spider diagram and it's all beautifully colour coded and summarised from an exercise book and all of that kind of thing. and then you take a packet of sweets and put a sweet over each section of the spider diagram, and once you've read it, eaten the sweet. Or maybe something similar like, I'm going to do 10 minutes of reading, then I'm going to do 5 minutes of summarising, then I'm going to have a 10-minute walk outside. It could be something like that. Now, it is a bit of a controversial thing. I mean, it worked for me when I was younger to revise because my brain is very much wants to procrastinate, and if there's an incentive for me, that works out well. But you've got to see if it works for you, trying to kind of trick your brain into wanting to revise, because I know sometimes the slog and the thought of how much there might be to do can be really intimidating. But just making sure like you are as prepared as you can be, you're well organised, you've got all that stuff, your teacher's there to support you, you know, you've got a playlist of videos to watch and things like that. I think it's going to just really help you. So I'm looking at my list. I think I've pretty much said everything. There are so many more ways that you can revise, like there's no right or wrong way, whatever works for your brain. And you've got to remember as well, you've got other exams too. Don't do too much that it's going to burn you out towards the end of your exam period. So do what you can, and that's better than doing nothing. So hopefully this video's been useful and you've got some good ideas of how to revise from it. Sorry I've just been rambling for 10 minutes, but yeah, that is it. Thank you very much. Bye.